We've done sleepers, so of course we've got to look at busts. Points leagues, ESPN, Yahoo. Who are the worst? The absolute worst picks that you can make? Michael Bolton knows.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I'm just back from a sneaky link vacay. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, through September the 22nd, all FanDuel customers, when they place a $5 bet, get a 3-week free trial for NFL Sunday Ticket, thanks to YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. And we are available on all platforms, so give us a thumbs up and leave your comments down below. If you haven't seen it, today actually, because they're coming out on the same day, we did a show talking about sleepers, value picks, guys to look to draft for Yahoo and ESPN points leagues using the default scoring settings. And now we do the flip side of that. Which guys have they got too high that I think you should be avoiding? Yesterday, we covered about, 70 names. I keep saying 70. I don't know if that's actually the number, but it's around that number. Today, it's actually a smaller number. We're probably looking at about 44 or 43 names across both of these sites. Because, someone that gets ranked at 130, I don't care if I think that's 60 off, whatever. That's flyer zone, we don't care. So I'm just looking at the earlier parts of a draft. And generally that means that when we're talking bust, there are just fewer names that we're paying attention to. Because I'm not going to label your late round picks as like, whoa, what a disaster, what are you doing? Unless you're taking Gordon Hayward or Markelle Fultz, someone who is retired and someone who's not playing for a team. That's a pretty bad pick, but that's not what we're talking about right here. What we are talking about is fantasy busts, points leagues, Yahoo, ESPN. We'll start off by looking at the Yahoo busts. The guys that I just think are a little bit too highly valued. Usually I use about 20 to 25 spots of ranking value. If someone's off by that, I'll put them as a bust. I think that's probably just too much of a gap to talk about. And let's start with Yahoo. I don't really know what the infatuation is on Yahoo with Aaron Nesmith. We can talk about it, and I talked about it at length in the sleeper video that Yahoo runs the hybrid ranking system, where it tries to be both points and categories, which of course helps nobody and hinders everybody. Actually, that's not true. It can help you if you understand what it is and understanding which guys then become better targets on certain platforms. But I don't even think I'd look at Nesmith in a category league, let alone a points league. That doesn't make sense to me either way. So Aaron Nesmith sits at a rank of 114 and an ADP of 130. There is no way that I would be touching Aaron Nesmith in any sort of points league this season. Would he average 20, almost 23 fantasy points last season? That's not enough to be a starter. No way at all. Absolutely no chance. Brook Lopez. I'm just down on Brook Lopez this season. His rank is 73. His ADP is 75. Brook Lopez last season had a very up and down year. We know that. But even at his best, Brook Lopez wasn't, or that's not true. At his mid to late career best, he wasn't a good points league player. Like last season, he was 99th. 99th. And I know that this is, again, that's skewing category. I wouldn't touch him in category leagues at that spot, but at his skewing category, we're definitely not doing that in the points league. Not close. I think it might actually be worse for Brook this season. Maybe he drops off a little bit more, but regardless, you don't just have to go near him at that spot. Ayo had a strong end to last season. There were a lot of guys injured in Chicago. He also is just not a very good points league player. He gets by on some shooting, which at times is something that's hard to trust. He averaged just 23 points. That ranked him 163rd last season. Look, he's ranked 119th, which again suggests you'd consider him a starter in a standard league, which I absolutely would not. He still is going to be coming off the bench. There is Josh Giddey, there is Kobe White, there is the return of Zach LaVine, and Lonzo Ball exists. Maybe, I think. There's just no way there's any value in that sort of selection for old mate Ayo at those spots. And those ones are Nesmith. It's a later round one. Took him around 10. Dosunmu about the same. Lopez is a little bit earlier. We're not interested in those ones. And that's where some of this value is. We'll touch on some of the earlier ones later on. But a guy that is one of the bigger illustrations, I guess, of the differences between where your category league and points league value sits is going to be the big fella in New Orleans, Herbalife Jones, who's ranked at 99. His ADP is 97. I even think for some people in category leagues that gets a little bit too early, considering his value hyper concentrated in a variable stat in steals. But for points leagues, like, he's nowhere near this. He didn't even score 25 a game last season. The team is more crowded with the addition of DeJounte Murray. And I'm not sure what's happening with Brandon Ingram, but like, Herb is just not worth anywhere close to a top 100 selection. He averaged 11 points with 3.5 boards and under 3 assists. Steals were nice, but he's not like getting two steals and 2 blocks. It's 1.4 and 0.8. It's just not enough there. I also don't believe that Clint Capela is going to be worth drafting inside the top 100. Capela, like a lot of these guys, is a better category league player than a points league player. Last season, Capela did average 31 fantasy points. That put him at 80th. So he's ranked 74th this season. And that is, again, with, he's a year older like we all are, but he's pushing more towards decline phase. Maybe a Onyeka Okongwu starts over him. I don't know. It is possible. And that's just, there's no upside at all. And that's part of what we want to do in fantasy drafts. We want security. We want to limit downside at certain spots. We want to hit upside at certain spots. But Capela at 74 doesn't limit downside. It gives you no upside. It's just a bad pick. And that selection there makes absolutely zero sense to me in the context of anything that we're doing from a drafting perspective, especially in a points league perspective. There's a bunch of point guards on this list, and they do the lower usage point guards as a general. We know the general rule about points leagues. It's tied to usage. It's tied to minutes. The higher scorers do better than the low scorers. Real life points, that's how fantasy points translates on the Yahoo system. So these guys, a lot of these guys are lower scoring players whose value is tied up in other categories in category leagues. So Tyus Jones is ranked at 96. That's cool. Apparently he's going to start. That's cool as well. He was 96th last season in Washington. And he didn't have to share the ball with Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant. He didn't have to battle Grayson Allen for closing minutes or Royce O'Neal. It's just a waste of a pick for Tyus at 96. It's an absolute waste. I don't see any reason why you would be convinced. Even in a category league, I'm a little bit not interested in him at that spot. But like in a points league, like we're 100% not touching that. There's no way. At 96. Now, his ADP at 111, Tyus, is probably a little bit better. I still don't love that. I still wouldn't want him as a starter in my points league team, but that's where we're at. The poop cookie Michael Porter Jr. has an ADP of 67 and a rank of 70. Why? Now, he is a guy that is a point scorer without really doing a huge amount else. And last season, he was 90th, averaging a bit under 30 fantasy points. I don't think KCP leaving means that Porter gets more usage. That's not really how usage works. So you're going 25, 30 spots ahead of what he's been in the past. I don't think he's going to be a 20-point per game scorer. I just don't see any upside in that. Alex Caruso. Not bad value for him in category leagues where he ranks at 100 with an ADP of 104. But with the way that Yahoo point scoring system is set up, he was 129th last season. It's going to be real tough to get to that number 100. He averaged 10 points with 4 rebounds and 3.5 assists, and his value is in the 1.7 steals, and it's the 1 block a game, and he shot pretty well. But that doesn't matter. That doesn't translate particularly well into a standard fantasy point scoring format. So taking Caruso around that spot, and this is the reason why all this is really important. Obviously, you want to get value picks in your fantasy drafts. Of course, you want to do that. But when you're in a draft and you're sorting it by ADP or you're sorting it by rank, and your time's running down, and it becomes hard to type in a name to search or to scroll down the list. So you see who's at the top, and you're sitting there at 105 and go, Caruso's at the top. I guess he's really good. Let's take him. And there's just no value in that. So understanding the sort of pitfalls to avoid. Kristaps Porzingis is going to be one of those big ones because he's going to sit at like 60. He's going to be sitting at the top of those lists for rounds, I'm guessing. Caruso's one of them. Mike Conley, I do really like Mike Conley in a category league. Getting that level of three-point shooting and that level of assists is really strong, but he is going to be so low usage. There is old person injury risk there. He didn't crack the top 125 last season, so the rank at 113 doesn't really make sense. I think they probably ease off a little bit more on Conley this season. It's not a terrible one. I'm not 100% against this one, but it just doesn't fully jive with me. And then Marcus Smart has an ADP of 130. He's got a rank of 117. Marcus Smart last season was really, really good, especially for category leagues. For points leagues, it wasn't awesome. It was 110th, which is still better than these numbers. But remember that he was the point guard. He was getting the usage because Ja Morant wasn't there. Morant is there. Smart's probably going to be playing the 3. He'll play some backup point guard, but his role is not the same. So I'm not investing in him to sort of do what he did last season in the limited time that he played and expecting that that's just going to turn around and happen again. I really don't see a rationale as to how or why that could happen. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. When we're kids, it's a lot of curiosity. You know that. You're around kids. You've been a kid. We've all been kids at some point. We're always looking to find something new. What's the new thing we can learn about and question people about? What interests do we develop? But as you get older, time wears on you. The gravity and pressure of life maybe stifles some of that curiosity. Well, therapy can be a way to help get that back. It's not going in there and go, hey, tell me how to be curious again. That's not really how it works. It's about like prioritizing parts of yourself. The interesting things about learning and mastering new tasks and skills can be a way to balance some of the things that become difficult in your life. And therapy gives you skills and tools to be able to prioritize and find the things to make you a better person, to others in your life. So if you've been thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's online. It's suited to your schedule. You fill out a questionnaire. They match you up with a therapist and you see how that all goes. If you don't really mix and match with them well, that's okay. You can change to another therapist who probably fits you a little bit better. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. So we're here talking Yahoo Fantasy Points League busts, guys that are just priced out. They're just too high. Where their rank or their ADP, or in a lot of cases both, just sits a little bit too high. Let's get into more of the mid-range area now. And this is a common one for me. It's really across all formats. But Mikal Bridges has never been a super strong points league player. He moves across, obviously, to the Knicks this season after a disappointing year with the Nets. And like his rank at 60, his ADP at 53, it just doesn't really, I don't think, make a ton of sense for a points league setup. Last season, he was 74th. He averaged under 33 fantasy points. Do you think he's getting better than that? And the answer should be a resounding absolutely not. What are you talking about? Because we know the number one thing that drives fantasy point scoring, well, the equal number ones, usage and minutes. Minutes staying the same. Usage definitely coming down. So really find it hard to see how Bridges is going to do better than he did last season, which was nowhere near that ADP, or not even really at that rank. Keegan Murray's another one here that I don't get why he is continually priced up as high as he is. It's easy to talk about, easy enough to talk about third-year players and the improvements and the growth they can have, but context is always going to be important. Now, Keegan's got an ADP of 76. His rank is 71. But there's almost no way that Keegan Murray does not see a step back in usage this season. And last season, he was not even a top 100 player. So you going to him at rank of 71 or an ADP of 76 in a category league is crazy. But in a points league, it's even more crazy. There's just no need for it. He's not a gigantic rebounder, although they may go up. Maybe his defensive stats do go up. But if you're banking on improvement in efficiency, who cares? It doesn't translate across to a category to a points league. He averaged 15 and 5 last season on 18 usage in 34 minutes. Those minutes aren't really changing. The usage is almost definitely going down. I don't see any way that he could beat that number. I've got Derek White on this list, who is definitely more suited towards being a category league player. White has an ADP of 51 with a rank of 54, and he was a huge win last season, a huge surprise. He also didn't crack the top 65 in Yahoo Points League, so it's just an easy avoid based on format differences. Bobby Portis, I just don't like drafting a guy like Portis where I need Giannis or Lopez to be out for him to really even touch this number. And those numbers at a rank of 107 and an ADP of 115 suggest that you're drafting Bob Portis to be in your starting lineup. I don't like that idea. Yeah, he will be fine. He'll be pretty good, actually. If Giannis is out and if Lopez is out, that's fine. But if they're not, what is he? And last season, he was the 119th, 27 fantasy points. I don't want that as a starter. Zach Edey was initially ranked really high on Yahoo. He's moved down to 140. His ADP still sits at 108. Yeah, look, he might start. That's true. But even if he does, I don't think he's playing 26 minutes. He might be 23. And I'm not sure that, I'm pretty confident he's not going to have the level of usage that he had at Purdue. And he's not going to be putting up 33 usage and 86% free throw attempt rate, nothing like that. He'll be an interesting rebound guy with some field goals and blocks, which is okay as a category league later round player, but not in your round 9, round 10 spot for a points league. That just that doesn't really add up to me. I'm also, that I am a little concerned about what we do with Kevin Durant this season. I didn't like what I saw the final 25, 30 games of last season. I didn't like the performance in the playoffs. I didn't like the drop in assists and usage when he played and shared the court with Beal and Booker. I don't like the fact that if Tyus Jones is there, it means he probably sees fewer assists. The assists have to go somewhere. And he's 36, and I'm not banking on 75 games played. And to throw all that together, Kevin Durant was the 12th ranked player last season in points leagues. He averaged 45.7. That's really good. But with all those factors put in, and the fact that he did drop significantly towards the second half of the season, and those other factors again with Beal there, and with Jones, I'm just, at 10, there's no way that I'm doing it. 14, you could consider it. I won't. I just don't think that it's value there. Naz Reid is ranked at 103. Is he just like the new Bob Portis? He's still a backup. He's playing behind Towns and Gobert, and yes, they could get hurt at any point, and Kyle Anderson is gone, but Naz was 25 fantasy points a game last season. That's 140th. That's not worthy of a mid-9th round pick for a reserve center who's not a gigantic scorer. I don't get that. Jalen Suggs' rank at 85 feels about right for a category league, but he is a guy that is driven by defensive stats. He hits some threes. He's a decent out-of-position blocks guy. At that 85, that's not of interest to me. I don't think that works from a points league perspective at all. Josh Hart, I just don't see how the minutes get there. He's also just not a good fantasy points league player. Even with the gigantic minutes that Joshy played last season, he didn't even crack 28 fantasy points a game. He finished 114th, and he's currently at 120 ADP and 130 rank. Yes, it will take some injuries to get there, and that could happen to anybody. I'm just not going to take him around that spot. The next one is Miles Turner, which is, again, one of those illustrations of the drawbacks of a hybrid ranking system, because Miles Turner at pick 41 or 43 is reasonable. It's defensible in a category league. His rank is 41 at the moment. His ADP is 43. He was 69th giggity in points leagues last season, so like that, you just have to avoid it. You have to know how to interpret these ranks that are put up as default in Yahoo drafts, because you could end up getting stuck with a Miles Turner, which at 40 you might sound, that sounds pretty reasonable, but it's not, given the format that you are playing. That just is not one that I think is going to make a ton of sense for you. And I think you should be looking for moves that do make a little bit more than 0 sense. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. We have been talking about FanDuel for a very long time. That makes sense. They are America's #1 sportsbook. And now we've got a little bit of something different for you. Through until September the 22nd, FanDuel is giving every customer who places a $5 bet a 3-week free trial for NFL Sunday Ticket, thanks to YouTube and YouTube TV. With your YouTube TV base plan, you're able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. And all you need is that Google account. You need that valid form of payment. And of course, if you want, you can go in there and cancel that at any point. But all you got to do is place a $5 bet and you get 3 weeks. Free trial, NFL Sunday Ticket. So go to FanDuel.com right now and download America's #1 sportsbook. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, so I timed this one correctly, actually, because now we've done Yahoo. We've talked about Yahoo busts in points leagues. Let's bust it up for ESPN. Who are the guys that are bad? Who are the guys that are positioned in the wrong spot? And again, I will say a positive thing about ESPN. They have different rankings for points leagues and category leagues, which is awesome. You need to have that. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff is bad and hasn't been touched since April. Why would it be? We're 5 months after that and the NBA season's 40 days away. Why wouldn't you touch it? But it hasn't. So when you head into a draft, and I tested this today, like I thought, is this real? Like, are these numbers, like, we're getting these numbers, we pull them out and we have them on Basketball Monster. And I'm looking back, this is right. This can't be right. These numbers don't make any sense. So I went into a draft, a points league draft, and yep, there they were. Jalen Johnson sat at 175. All right, cool. Glad they split the rankings up. That's a good thing. And much like, Frogut possessed by the devil. The rest is bad. So let's take a look at where we sit with ESPN ranks at the moment. Can't for the life of me figure out why I'd be ever interested in drafting Kevin Huerter at pick 103. His ADP is 123, so people are at least responding the correct way and saying, absolutely not, we're not doing that. But Huerter, I don't know if he's going to start. He might. But Kieran Ellis is there, Malik Monk is there. Huerter struggled last season. There's just, what's the justification for a guy that averaged under 21 ESPN fantasy points last season, which ranked him 188th, to sit there and go, yep, everything's in line for him to be 80 spots better this season? It's actually, no, the opposite. No, don't get sucked into it. Jared Vanderbilt bar. What's going on here? Rank 108, ADP 125. We in opposite world? Vanderbilt's not a good points league player. He might start over Rui Hachimura. Maybe there are extra minutes for him to play backup center with the crucifix Christian Wood injured now. But I can't tell you that I just, any more that I just don't care. He ranked, hold on to it, because he ranked 264th last season. He averaged 16 fantasy points. What are we doing? We expect him to get to 30. What? How about the big fella, the horse? Keldon Johnson. He's got an ADP of 110. He's got a rank for points leagues at 86. Keldon Johnson last season played 28 minutes. He averaged 28 ESPN fantasy points. You might think that's not bad. It is not bad. You're right. It's 107th. So, in a season where Wembanyama's probably going to play more minutes, in a season where they draft Steph Castle and bring in Chris Paul and bring in Harrison Barnes, we think that Keldon's going to do more? I don't. At all. And taking him at 86, I see no upside in that whatsoever. You want to talk about no upside? What's going on with Jalen Green, who is ranked at 27? He's got an ADP of 35, which is obviously very closely following that rank. Green had a really hot stretch where he's a top 5 player for 10 games last season, and that brought his season total to 75th. He averaged 32 fantasy points. He was benched in multiple fourth quarters. Not like their guard room got thinner because they brought in Reed Shepherd. It is possible that Jalen Green pushes and gets 40 fantasy points. I'm not going to rule that out. Taking him at 27 or at 35 gives you absolutely no upside whatsoever and 99% downside. There's just no reason to even entertain that into your head. But when you go into a draft, he is going to be sitting there at 27 until they update it, which I'm sure they will. But yeah. Trey Jones sits at 121 with an ADP of 134. And the reason this is important to note is, I'll give it a pass, right? And there will always be multiple people who will chime in with a comment, yeah, don't worry, ESPN's going to update it. Yes, that is true. But this is September the 9th. It is the 9th of September. The NFL season has started. And I wait on doing these things so that I give them the chance to update it versus I'm going to do it on August the 3rd and say, what are you guys doing? Look at your ranks haven't changed. It's September the 9th. Media day is 3 weeks away. 40 days from the start of the year. And we're still sitting here with rankings in your draft rooms, which have been open since August, that takes no consideration that Chris Paul plays for the Spurs now. So we're just not drafting Trey Jones. And I know why he is there. But that doesn't stop the criticism of him being there. Because if you go into a draft, you don't know necessarily that these were updated in April, or they haven't been touched since. You might just go in there, if you are blindly following, which again, I do suggest you don't. And if you're watching this show, I hope that you don't. You might go, oh yeah, Trey Jones sounds about right. That sounds pretty decent. We might have a crack. Don't have a crack. Don't touch it there. No, thank you. No, thank you at all. What about the big fella, Shaden Sharp, whose rank is 70? Now, Shaden had a disappointing season. He got injured during it. He had a nice little run when a lot of players were out early in the year. That brought his season total to 113th and under 28 fantasy points per game. 70 is requiring a pretty big jump up with Avdia, Simon, Scoot, Grant, Ayton all still on the team. I, again, like the Jalen Green one. Maybe there is an outside shot that Sharp gets there. Maybe. But don't do it. Look, we're definitely not touching him there. Giggity. The man on the street, JordanClarkson, Jordan Clarkson. Last season wasn't particularly good. His efficiency was well down. He ranked at 104th. He's ranked this season's at 99. His ADP's at 119. So you say that's not that far off where he was last season. But he also started the beginning of the season, then got benched. And as we know, the Jazz are almost definitely going to be sitting him down in April and March. And we talk about where the value is. If Jordan Clarkson sits there at 127, okay, all right, let's see what happens. Maybe he gives me top 100 numbers for 3 months and I move on. But if you're looking at 99, well, that's filling out your active roster still. And I don't think you want to do that. I just realized Keegan Murray's on this list twice for some reason. Oh, no, we talked Keegan Murray in the Yahoo section, didn't we? My bad. Because we'll talk about him in a second, because Io DeSumu's here as well. Rank at 113. So both Yahoo and ESPN think that Io is worth a pick in a standard league. For points leagues, Io averaged 23 points last season. Actually, it's my bad. I was actually looking at the Yahoo scoring numbers for that. So I take that part back. Io was not averaging that number. Let's have a look what Io actually was averaging last season. He was averaging 25 points at 148. So, yeah, we're not doing that. That's just not a reasonable position to be considering him. As for Clarkson, I said he was 100th. I was wrong. He was 130th on ESPN points. So that makes even less sense. Keegan Murray's pushed up to number 51. I'd love to understand that. Last season, Keegan was 97th. 97th. It's a big jump, man. When all of the conditions for a jump to happen are pushing against him. Just a burning of a pick. And then Bob Portis sits at 102. Similar names here across both sites. But again, this is a point-specific list on ESPN. Portis ranked 125th last season. 102 is just a burning of a pick. It's a waste. It's useless. The next bunch of guys, you might be higher on Nikola Vucevic than I am. Reasonable. Reasonable people can have that idea. Oh, I think he's bad and I think he struggled. In fact, I know that he struggled last season because I can just look at his ESPN points numbers, where he averaged 38 fantasy points, which made him 48th. He's ranked 29th for this upcoming season with an ADP of 42. And we can say whether taking Clarkson at 100 or Portis at 107, maybe that doesn't ruin our season. If you're taking Vooch in round 3, just wave it goodbye immediately. Just say goodbye. It's done. Clint Capela's ranked at 96, probably a better spot than where we see it on Yahoo. He was 92nd last season, so there is some reasonable value there. I just think he's going to actually fall back a little bit, like I discussed in the Yahoo section, with Okongwu maybe getting more minutes, and I just don't want to take that downside pick there. Tyus Jones is ranked at 81. That, again, this hasn't been updated, so at this point, even though he was a free agent, he was still allegedly on the Wizards, and now he goes to Phoenix. His usage is going to be minuscule. Hey, by the way, would you say Jones is the most populous name in the NBA? I think there's 11 players currently on rosters with the name Jones, including a bunch of blokes you've never heard of. Isaac Jones, Colby Jones. There's no other player like David Jones. There's so many Joneses. But anyway, Tyus. Last season in Washington, he was 70th. So I guess the 81 makes a little bit of sense there, but also he doesn't play for Washington. He plays for Phoenix, so his minutes might not be as high and his usage will almost definitely be lower. I just don't want to do that there. I've gone into discussions about Walker. We'll get Walker Kessler in a second. Mikal Bridges, he's up at 45. Okay, that seems wrong. Seems wrong. He was 77th last season in 33 minutes and loses usage. One of the easiest avoids I reckon you can find is taking him at that spot. And then there's Walker Kessler, who didn't play particularly well last season. He's got an he's got a rank last season of 121. So ESPN's come in and said, right, 63. I do expect that Kessler is better this season. I think top 100 is possible. I think he plays more minutes. 63 just seems outrageous. I don't know why we'd be going that high. And I think, when I say that, I can say the same for Jabari Smith, another third-year player. Third-year players, they do improve. But context is really important. Jabari averaged 29 fantasy points on ESPN last season. That pushed him to be 114th. So taking him at 65 would be a big, big leap of faith into a gigantic improvement, and I'm absolutely not willing to do that. Brandon Ingram sits at 48 on ESPN's rankings. Cool. He was 51st last season, and they had DeJounte Murray, and there's uncertainty about where Ingram plays or what his role is, because is he the third offensive option now? Is he the third ball handler? Is he the fourth ball handler? Is he benched for Trey Murphy? Taking him inside the top 50, again, is setting your draft on fire when it's just needless. You don't need to do that. Austin Reeves is ranked at 55, and while I do like Reeves, I absolutely do not like Reeves at that spot. He was 78th last season, and there is room for some improvement, perhaps. But also, maybe not. And I'm just don't want... Nothing's changed. The Lakers team hasn't changed. They're exactly the same. They added Dalton, Connect, and Bronny, but who cares? The team is the same. So I don't really see why we're going up there in Austin. Brook Lopez, not probably as egregious as it was on Yahoo here. He was 81st last season. He's ranked at 92. I just think there is going to be a bigger drop from Brook this year. The second half of his season, once Doc took over, was very much worse than the beginning of the season. So I'm pretty concerned about that. And Josh Hart, we've talked about it. The minutes just aren't going to be there. He's ranked 125. His ADP is 120. You're expecting him to do what he did last season, which is just probably unrealistic. And last season, he was 126th, which half the season he played 40 minutes a night. And that's just not a realistic outcome, I don't think, for how this Knicks team and Thomas Thibodeau is going to run the rotation. I've got 4 more guys left. I've left maybe one of the more interesting ones to last. Asar Thompson sits at 109. We can all like Asar Thompson. I do like Asar Thompson. He was 160th last season. I'm just not sure how they distribute their minutes. It's a new coach and a new GM that didn't pick Asar. They drafted Ron Holland, and his fit with Asar is questionable. Fintecchio's there, and Harris is there, and Ivy's there, and Cade is there. I like Asar a lot. I'm just not going to 109 for him. John Collins is at 93. Disappointing start to last season. They changed their lineups up, and he got into a solid spot as the season went on. And he finished as the 101st ranked player in 30 minutes a night. 93 is just expecting him to do more than last season, and I don't think that's possible. And much like with Brandon Ingram, and again, these ranks were made before DeJounte Murray was traded there, again, highlighting the inadequacy of having something in your draft rooms from 5 months ago. CJ McCollum sits at number 58. Last season, he was 47th. So 58 would seem normal, would seem fine. Yeah, that seems decent. But that's not the reality. Is he going to start? Is Herb going to start? I find it really hard to see how CJ replicates his numbers from last year. And the last one's going to be one of those ones where you go, Josh, you say that Paolo Banchero is that real poster child person for the guy who's better in points leagues versus category leagues. And as a general rule, yes, that is true. I agree with that. ESPN points leagues are different to Yahoo points leagues. Because if you were drafting at 19 in a Yahoo points league, I'd say, that's fine. You want to take Paolo there? Yeah, it's a little early, but he's in year 3. He's got every part of the runway to explore and improve what he does and do a little bit more and jump some of the efficiency up, and he can do a lot more. All right. But for an ESPN points league, efficiency does count. Last season, he was 31st. No, he wasn't. Sorry, my bad. Last season, he was 50th. 50th. It's a big leap to give him 50 to 19. And I do have him jumping up from 50 to about 40, but not 19. And the general consensus, I guess, would be, yeah, in a points league, you can take Paolo in round 2. And I'm just not sure that on ESPN that is the way you want to go about it. Because it's a different scoring system. The efficiency does have an impact, not as big as in category leagues, but it is there. And that is just going a little bit too hard, I think, on the big fella, Paolo Banchero. And that is the busts for ESPN. And for Yahoo, obviously, earlier in the show. This show will get redone at some point when updates are made to Yahoo and to ESPN. And we'll highlight what's changed and who remains busts and who remains sleepers at different points. But I don't know when that's going to be because I don't know when they are updating it. But just be aware that this is on September the 9th. Hopefully they don't change it tomorrow. Well, hopefully they do for your sake, but for my sake in terms of putting the work in and creating the videos, that things don't get changed tomorrow. But they could. It's happened before. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.